Hi everyone, so I'm here today with Shabnam, Jenny and Jeroen, and we're going to talk about a few aspects of breathwork.
In your shamanic teachings, the ancestors play an important role, especially in the archetypal work. Can you share us more about what role the ancestors plays in your work and in the breath work?
So it's very interesting, all very nature-based cultures have so-called ancestor worship or ancestor reverence. And I don't think it's necessarily ancestor worship, but it's an acknowledgement of the fact that once our ancestors pass, they somehow stay with us and they become our guides and our protectors. And for me, one can make sense of that just by thinking about the genes. You know, we carry the genes of our ancestors in our bodies. There are certain messages, certain memories that we carry with us that has kind of just been handed down. Some scientists might call it sort of junk DNA, but there is this information within us. So when we work with our ancestors, there's actually two aspects that are very important. The one aspect is to heal the ancestral trauma that might have been handed down, to let go of the old charges, to let go of the old messaging, the old belief systems, so that we can have a clean slate as individuals, so that we don't have to carry that whole trauma of the ancestry. And then the other aspect, of course, is that our ancestors held wisdom, knowledge, understanding. One could postulate that everything each one of our ancestors has ever learned has kind of culminated in us and has been handed down to us in some way. So that is also a power that we can access. But very often the trauma side is mixed with the power side, and they kind of get mixed together, and they kind of make a mess and a confused mass of information. So when we heal the trauma of the ancestry, we can clear some of the clouds so that the power of the ancestry can be seen, and we can actually access information that doesn't come from us personally, but that comes from this line. So one of the ways that I work with the ancestors is through the archetypes. You know, certain ancestors represent certain archetypes. You know, maybe the father was a real tyrant, so one could say that becomes like the god Kronos, if you're thinking in terms of Greek mythology. Or maybe the mother was a really amazing mother and she was really nurturing, so therefore she might hold and carry the archetype of Demeter. So when we have that mother archetype of Demeter activated, then that becomes a powerful mothering energy. And of course, any mothering energy can have a positive aspect or a negative aspect. The mother could be too smothering, or otherwise the mother, could give all the nurturing that's needed. So through this work with the archetypes, we can actually find the ways to balance the message of each ancestor, especially parents and grandparents, because we have a direct connection to them. And when we can see these ancestors in an archetypal setting, we can kind of pin an energy to the way that they behaved, and we can understand them better, and we can call on those archetypes to help heal those spells. They are literally spells that are put on us, family spells, family messaging, family conditioning, certain areas that were emphasized, other areas that were totally denied. So through this work with the archetypes, we can actually call upon the energy of the archetype, which is a little bit more impersonal, pin them to our direct ancestors, and that then creates an alchemy for healing and change.
So you spoke about archetypes, and can you explain what that means, the archetypes? And then you work with the cards also that have Greek mythology and archetypes. And can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, so a lot of my work is based around archetypes. An archetype is almost like a template for behavior. So you can have a mother archetype or a father archetype or an eternal pilgrim or seeker archetype or the healer archetype, etc. So very often in mythology, these have become personified as gods or goddesses. They're kind of general forces of nature, forces of personality that we all naturally have that become personified. So for example, the goddess Demeter in Greek mythology personifies the mother, the mothering energy that all women have when they have a child. Something else kicks in, some instinctual behavior kicks in that helps that mother to access information, universal information, but also that helps that mother have the skills and the strength that she needs to take care of that child. So these archetypes are like templates. They are forces of personality, forces of consciousness that we can enter and grow through. All archetypes have a negative side and a positive side. Very often we've got a little bit of all of those until we learn about the archetypes, until we learn to cultivate the more positive aspect of each archetype. One of my recent projects have been working and creating these mythology cards, cards based around Greek mythology. Here is an example that's of Zeus. And Zeus is the god of leadership, for example, the god of creating order and justice in the world. His negative side could be becoming the tyrant and abusing power. So I've created this deck of cards as a system that we can actually use for greater understanding, drawing the card and that card giving us some information. And I always use those before any sessions because it helps also give people focus and greater understanding about what their journey is and which archetypes are activated. And in terms of archetypes, I think all people have one or two main archetypes that they embody, that they just kind of naturally live out in their lives. Then we can draw archetypes in the form of drawing a card, in order to give yourself some information about your life. But then we can also actually choose archetypes to work with. If you're wanting love in your life and you want to create a relationship, you might choose to work with the archetype of Aphrodite or Eros to actually cultivate that energy in order to call that energy into your life, and not just as, let's say, a prayer or a thought that you're calling. You're actually calling on that whole force, that whole structure of consciousness that is kind of there, ready and waiting to work with us. We actually call that energy in to give wings to our journey, our flight of learning about ourselves and about our lives.
So when you speak about archetypes, do the different archetypes are gender specific? So women can have only the archetypes of Aphrodite and Demeter, and for men they have the archetypes to choose from between Zeus and all the other male. Is it gender specific, or how does that work?
Generally speaking, it's not gender specific. So, a woman can work with Zeus. A woman can have a very strong Zeus energy. That said, there are so many different expressions of these archetypes, both male and female, that as a woman, you could decide to work with a female archetype, or as a man, you could decide to work with a male archetype. For example, Zeus could also be expressed as his own daughter, Athena, which is also about creating order, which is about being a warrior who fights for the good, who strategizes, who uses her wisdom. So that really is a personal choice. You could either, as a woman, work with a male archetype, or you could choose to work with a female archetype. There are many correspondences, there are many overlaps. So there are no real rules about how that should be done. Obviously, the mother archetype is different to the father archetype. The mother archetype is Demeter, she's got specific roles. The father archetype is maybe Poseidon or Zeus, and that is a different way of working with that energy. But, the fathering, mothering energy, 80% of that is more or less the same anyway. And then, there's about 20% of that which is very specific to gender. So, the gods, the goddesses are free. The forces of nature are free. Very often, when we talk about certain medicines, some people ascribe a gender to a medicine, like a tree or whatever. And that's actually, I think, really just about how the person connects with that energy. I think spirits on the whole are kind of androgynous or hermaphroditic, meaning that they have both genders and both qualities, and probably way more we just only perceive in terms of gender.
So I have this big drum that I bought now, and when I do my breathwork sessions or I do yoga and we are in Shavasana, I use the drum, and I can feel like people are very intimidated by the music and the songs of, that are not mainstream, where you can just use a drum and it creates a feeling in the body. And doing breathwork with you using music as well to activate certain old memories that are in the cells because of our ancestors. Can you speak about that, what music does with the breathwork in the body?
So music is one of our most primal expressions as human beings. Since the beginning of time, people have made music. They've even found Neanderthal flutes 20,000 years old. So humans have always had music as an expression of their spirituality. And it's so deeply ingrained for 10, 20, 100,000 years, we don't really know. So that speaks the language of the soul. So when we work with, especially chants, like a rhythmic chanting style of music or a drum beat, it connects us to something very primal. It takes us out of the left side of the brain, the rational side of the brain, and gets us into a more, let's say, shamanic state or a more connected state. So the power of music when combined with breath work is incredible, because it does get us out of our modern, too scientific way of thinking, so that we can return to something a little bit more in the body, a little bit more in the subconscious mind. And of course, all music does create a journey. It brings in different associations from earlier in our lives, or associations to certain cultures or other experiences that we've had. So it really helps us transport ourselves out of the rational mind, out of the limited perspective of the ego. And I think that's what all breathwork does. Breathwork naturally expands the mind and the consciousness so that we can expand deeper into ourselves, but also that we can expand out of ourselves further so that we can see better, so that we can look back on ourselves and observe what we're doing in our lives, the good, the bad. But it also, through that expansion, it allows us to see further beyond, to see the bigger vision of where we're going and who we are becoming as individuals on this journey towards consciousness. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Thanks Shabnam, Jenny and Jeroen for your wonderful questions and input. And we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.